Let's continue with this meeting on relations between the European and the CELAC to face, the common challenges. It is a great honor to have with us Annika Lotson López, who's the head of the Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, a member of the Office of the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Politics of the European Union, and the Office of the Vice President of the European Commission. The title is Relationships between European Union and the Latin America and the Caribbean, defense of the multilateralism. I'm not going to emphasize Annika's curriculum because all participants have the bios of all panelists and they're also available on our website. So thanks a lot, Annika, for making the effort of coming here, taking a rush trip um, from Brussels in such a particularly complicated times of change in Brussels. It's a time of transition, so your presence here is particularly special. Thank you very much. You have the floor. Thank you very much. Or and good morning or good evening if you are in Latin America. Authorities, excellencies, and representatives. I want to start by thanking the Yuste Foundation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Spain, and the other institutions that made this meeting possible. It is a very timely event. I also wish to thank the Monastery of Santa Maria de Guadalupe, St. Mary of Guadalupe, for hosting us. It is a great honor and the presence to take the floor here on behalf of the High Representative of the External Foreign and Security Policy Affairs. Mr. Josep Borrell can't be here because he is on a mission in the Near East. As you know, since the High Representative started his mandate in the year 2008 and 16. Sorry, the interpreter corrects herself. I didn't get the date because of sound problems. So since Mr. Borrell became the High Representative in 2019, he has worked tirelessly to put Latin America and the Caribbean at the top of the strategic agenda of the European Union. Today, we can say that the commitment of the European Union with Latin America and the Caribbean has been made patent. And this was made possible thanks to the shared commitment of everyone, select the European Union, the private, the public sector, organizations of the civil society, experts, and members of the academia in both sides of the Atlantic. Together, we have gone from we have renewed the alliance and gone from a situation where there were just a bilateral summit to a more active period. Let's go over the keys of our relationship and its recent evolutions. First, far beyond the inertia of our historic and natural ties, the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean are partners by election, as the Secretary of State was saying. We share interests, fundamental values that make us particularly close when it comes to facing the current challenge thanks to our strategic alliance. Of course, as it happens in all long-lasting um, relationships, there are some differences that arise from our diversity, and there are many things to improve, starting by having better and more dialogue and listening. But we know that we can count on each other and we can count on the mutual solidarity, which is fundamental in a changing world and where stable alliances is more and more complicated. Our shared goal is the title of this meeting here today, creating certainties in the face of global shared challenges. The certainty of life with dignity, safety, prosperity in societies that are that have cohesion and respectful. We want to ensure the resilience of multilateral institutions and domestic institutions to this end, based on the principles of democracy and the right of law and the rule of law, sorry. And to do this, there are many initiatives that have already been mentioned. There are many challenges that have also been mentioned, like wars and pandemics, and there have been tragedies or situations that go against infrastructures. There's organized crime, and there are other aggressions that are maybe less tangible, like attacks to cybersecurity, disinformation, that aim to destabilize our societies. So these attempts to the trust in democracy is a very large attack, and that is one of the pillars of our society. We also have another threat that is um, those threats to our economic interdependencies. In the face of this, in the EU and Latin America and the Caribbean, we decided to renew our strategic alliances thanks to agreements and actions that help us address common priorities. Our priorities, as the director of the foundation mentioned, uh, include multilateralism. The Secretary of State talked about um, transitions, social, digital, and environmental transition. And we have security, defense, and democracy, human rights, and rule of law. And we address all of these together on different levels, multilateral, bi-regional, and uh, regionally. I am going to address these three levels in my presentation. Let's start with our cooperation on a multilateral level. Together, the European Union and the countries from Latin America and the Caribbean represent almost a third of all votes in the United Nations. That is why it's important to work together to have an impact when it comes to configuring world rules in arenas like sustainable development, trade, environment. We can all remember the success that we had last year with the High Seas Treaty on the conservation of marine biodiversity. We defended it together. We also defended firmly the respect to the Charter of the United Nations and the human rights. Humanitarian law, it's crucial when it comes to denouncing abuses like the one in Palestine, because we know that if we don't condemn abuses, we may be next. At the same time, the European Union, Latin America, and the Caribbean are working together to reinforce and reform these institutions and these international fora, because it's not enough to just denounce things and create laws. We have to make institutions more effective and inclusive. And particularly, the region of Latin America and the Caribbean is legitimately claiming a larger space of influence in the main decision-making aspects, and the European Union is supporting this. In the field of global justice, the Latin America and the Caribbean asks us to deepen our association to address together things like the alleviation of debt, uh, climate funding, and funding or financial architecture. And they can count on us in these fields. Let's talk about our bi-regional cooperation. Bi-regional cooperation between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean has intensified since 2019 in almost all levels. On the occasion of the ministry informal meeting that took place in Berlin on December 2020 under the German presidency of the Council, there we made clear that we had a common willingness to work together to better address, among other things, the multiple crises that arose from the pandemic that affected mostly Latin America and the green, digital, and fair transition. In a common declaration, we identified actions, very deep actions that had a multidimensional actions to improve our resilience in the face of these challenges. Thanks to all this intense work, we were able to uh, um, create one of our major achievements that was the EU-LAC meeting that took place last year. Other panelists have already touched upon this topic. It was the first summit in 8 years. It finished with a commitment to modernize our uh, ties. The commitment was to have meetings every 2 years, to have more ongoing dialogues, and we showed the world that we are politically aligned. The roadmap of this meeting um, for 23-25 established some key moments and key events that are taking place. The next summit will take place in 2025. In the meantime, there are other points that are being met. Kaya Kalas, who's representative of this meeting, and in before the European Parliament, Mrs. Kalas mentioned the importance of this 2-year summit. We may say that all the efforts that we have made are bearing fruit. It is fundamental to uh, keep the ball rolling and to strengthen our strategic shared agenda. We can't afford to lose another 10 years. On a sub-regional level and multilateral level, we have also uh, harvested fruits. For example, the um, association agreement with Central America, and there are different levels, like the trade level, and we have a trade agreement with um, different implications. After 5 years of negotiations, there was a decisive meeting between the High Representative and the President of Chile. Thanks to that, we have an advanced framework agreement with Chile on December 2023. This expands on our cooperations, political, commercial cooperations, and social cooperation. This is a modern and modernized agreement that includes never before seen elements in our cooperation, like for example, a cooperation on a security level or a section in the trade section to promote the participation of women in economy. I will allow myself to say something. At the beginning of last century, it was my grandmother, a trade woman from Cáceres, who for the first time took encaje de bolillos, the traditional embroidery, to Latin America. So I can say that I can tell you that she lived very well. She made a good living for herself and for her whole family, and she took that embroidery to Mexico. So in these last years, we have renewed our um, relationships with Mexico and with Brazil too. We celebrated a memorandums of understanding on uh, on energy with Argentina, on critical raw materials. We have established agreements with Chile, with Ecuador on security, Salvador, Guatemala. We have also worked with them. And as the ambassador here very well knows, there have been agreements with Honduras. High level dialogue has dialogues have been established with Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. For the near future, we need to keep working to concretize the agreement with Mexico, and we hope these will be able to be signed next year during the bilateral summit and the Mercosur. It is important to explain, and it's very important to understand that this is a very broad uh, agreement that is unprecedented and that includes cooperation and social aspects in addition to trade, and that it has major implications in the context that we have. And considering that the European Union and Mercosur include 700 million inhabitants, regions are connected by the thickest network of agreements, but the Mercosur agreement would be the first with this part of the region and would allow the European Union to uh, expand its presence and connections in the region beyond the US and China. We must make the most of the potential of our relationships. As of today, the EU investments in Latin America and the Caribbean involve over 2.7 million jobs in the region. The companies in the European Union have invested in Latin America and the Caribbean more than in China, India, and Japan put together. But in order to um, maintain this level, we need to keep paying attention to the region and to the attention that the region deserves. And we need to keep moving forward to create agreements that create certainty, as it should happen with our alliance. In the meantime, we are moving forward on different programs and very specific projects to achieve the objectives, to have better management of the transitions, just, fair, and digital and environmental transition. We will have other panels that will address this. So I don't want to talk too much about this, but I want to mention a few topics that we have been working on in the last years. For example, in the field of green transition, we have implemented different projects for cooperating to promote the ecological transition. And this is a mm, top priority for us. We must consider that Latin America holds half of the world's biodiversity, a third of the world sweetwater resources, and 33% of the forests in the world, including the Amazons. And preserving the Amazons is fundamental for the stability of the climate on a world level. European programs like Euroclimate, um, Amazonia Plus, the Initiative of Large Forest, and the SAFE project against deforestation are some of the key projects. In the field of green transition or digital transition, the most relevant example is the digital alliance between the EU and 23 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. The idea is to have better cooperation. We started the Avellan program that made it possible to install the first high-speed digital cable between the EU and Latin America, benefiting 65 million people in 5 countries. We are getting ready to expand this and to include other Latin America countries.
The Copernicus regional centers in Panama and Chile put the European spatial technology at the service of Latin America and the Caribbean in order to face together global and regional catastrophes. And the establishment of the Cybernetic Competence Center in Latin America has the goal to fight cyber crime. The development of what we call social transition, actually I see it as a fundamentally labor transition. We need to generate new capacities, new abilities in order to integrate everyone as part of these transitions. The European Union is making efforts and doing investments in the Erasmus Plus programs for Latin America with 144 million euros invested between 2022 and 2027, and the Bridge program for acknowledgement of qualifications. All of these dimensions are supported by the Global Investment Program Gateway, mentioned by the ambassador of Honduras. I will not delve into it because you've heard about its main pillars. But we need to accelerate its implementation and to keep a constant dialogue with the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean in order to update and identify common priorities or mutual benefits, and to implement that in the Horizon 2027. And last but not least, I want to highlight the enlarged Troika meeting that the ambassador mentioned as well, co-presided by the High Representative Borrell in New York, within the headquarters of the United Nations. That was a symbolic thing in order to reiterate our commitment with multilateralism. The High Representative of the European Union invited our um, uh, Latin American Caribbean partners to complete our common agenda and to enlarge it to defense and security that are not yet part of it, and to invisible infrastructures sustaining democracy and the rule of law. As for defense and security, they're all linked, they're all tied. It's been an increase of organized crime and drug trafficking. They create a vicious circle, multiplying corruption and impunity, which also weakens institutions, impacts on people and on the security of the state. Therefore, we intensify collaboration, cooperation on the judicial, political, technical, and diplomatic realms in order to uh, increase our cooperation. And a great visible outcome of it has been the exchange of information. Thanks to that, in just 2 years, between 2021 and 2023, 110 operations for drug confiscation have been implemented, but there's still a good way to go. Concerning defense, there is still a lot to do with Latin America. The European Union has been established in dialogues with some Latin American and Caribbean state. This partnership program is part of the activities in defense and security that have been developed recently in Cartagena de Indias. The Center for Spanish Cooperation hosted the first bi-regional seminar, including both civil and military officials. And with some countries such as Colombia or Peru, we habilitated several people in order for them to participate in common peace missions, joint peace missions by the European Union and the CELAC. And I will conclude with one matter that must preoccupy us all, and that's the need to reinforce our democratic institutions and the rule of law. The European Union is firmly committed and supports CELAC around these goals through the deployment or electoral observation missions. The positive impact was seen of those missions in the recent Guatemalan elections, despite the efforts for putting barriers on that and putting barriers on the transition to President Arevalo. Thanks to the action of this observation mission and to the diplomatic reinforcement of the European Union, it could guarantee a successful transition to President Arevalo. Actually, this mission was awarded a global prize for their tasks. And there's something that extremely worries the European Union and the High Representative as well, and that's the situation in Venezuela after the last state elections. The country is within an unprecedented crisis in the region. The High Representative have been tried to talk both with the opposing leaders and the different partners in the region, and the European Union is ready to use all tools for foreign policies, including sanctions, in order to support the defense of democracy in this country, in Venezuela. It is the wish of the European Union that Venezuela overcomes the crisis through a dialogue led by Venezuelans and with outcomes that include guarantees for all, because that will be the only way to guarantee a democratic, peaceful, and sustainable solution, which is in the interest of us all. And I will close my talk by thanking your attention and your presence here. It's difficult to do a few-minute summary of the intense activity being performed for the past few years. I did want to underline that some extraordinary progress has been made. That our collaboration is great, and it will continue to increase towards the summit, the next summit in Colombia. And so, as Carlos Fuentes, the Mexican writer, used to say, the Atlantic is not an abyss, it's a bridge. So I hope that at all levels, public, private, academic, experts, etc., we continue to reinforce this bridge and we continue to work for the prosperity and the well-being and security of us all to both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Annika, for your talk. You underlined the importance of those pillars on bilateral, but also multilateral relationships with very many perspectives for collaboration. It's a return ticket, it's a return fare with both territories, with both sides of the Atlantic. We must make a better use of these relationship, of this collaboration. You've put an emphasis on the outcomes of your work, and it's good to have good intentions as we do, but it's also necessary to translate those, as the ambassadors said it at the beginning. It's necessary to go concrete, to implement concrete actions that enable us to accelerate, because we need it. We need to accelerate within a changing world, which is also accelerated, in order not to be taken by surprise. So, thank you for your talk. I know that you need to go. We know that you need to go back to Brussels immediately, but we thank you for having been here with us this morning. Thank you, and let's go to the next session in a minute.